Okay, everyone, let's get to know public health and public health policy, and let's dive into this course into the main first topic, which is about the issue of prevention, which usually takes more time to sort of explain and get people excited about. In the middle of the pandemic, it's like the ultimate crash course in public health. And if in medicine, it's clinicians doing one-on-one interactions with patients. It's one patient at a time. You save one patient at a time. Public health, this is written on the, or etched into the walls of the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins. Protecting health, saving lives, millions at a time. And that's what public health does. Instead of one patient at a time, now it does large numbers of people, and it prevents people in the future from getting sick. And you all read this article, which is so foundational for understanding that for most of human history, the life expectancy was in the 40s. Now, that's misleading because if you could just get past the age of 5 and not die, then you didn't die in your 40s, you tended to die in your 60s or so, late 50s, 60s. But the average, the skewed average of life expectancy in the 40s was because so many children died up until just maybe 100 years ago. Up until 100 years ago, the death rate, it varied, but it was like 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 children died before the age of 5. Since the early 1900s and the rise of public health and prevention and sanitation and water and vaccines, now we get an average life expectancy in the United States of close to 80, around 80. And if that's the average, some people, the average Asian females is 90. Asian females in Northern Virginia, 92. So life expectancy on a broad scale now is 80. Used to get 1 life, now you get 2. And of all that extra life expectancy, you get an extra now 25, 30 years. The majority of those extra years you get are not due to medicine. Medicine's great and valuable, and it helps as much the quality of your life. All this extra life expectancy to really move the needle from 40s to 80 is due to public health. It's things that don't happen. It's the prevention. It's all the disease, all of the diarrhea, all the maternal mortality, all the tuberculosis and pneumonia, influenza, cholera, all those things, smallpox that kill people young and killed lots of people. They're all prevented now. So there's life expectancy. You guys need some good news. We all need good news. Age-adjusted death rates. Just how many people die per 100,000 people? So you compare apples to apples to apples at any time of history you compare them to. The death rate has gone down dramatically. Life expectancy has gone up significantly. Most of this is due to public health. Again, the thing that used to really bring down the scores was lots of children dying before the age of 5, before the age of 3. Infant mortality rate now, a fraction of what it used to be. Maternal mortality rate, a fraction of what it used to be. It's ticked back up again in recent years in the United States, which is worrying, and we need to focus on that. It's a problem. But relative to human history, maternal mortality is a fraction of what it used to be. 1900, number of deaths per 100,000 people. 2 things in this graph. There's half as much just death, just in general, there's half as many people dying as a proportion of the population as there was 100 plus years ago. There's just less death proportionally. And then what used to kill people, the top 3 were infectious diseases, something I could give to you. Pneumonia, I could breathe on you. Tuberculosis, I could breathe on you. GI, diarrhea, something in the water, you could get infected. Those are the big killers. Now it's cancer and heart disease. These are the things that kill you when you have the privilege of living usually into old age. Heart disease was up here, cancer was way up here. And that's because you have to live long enough to get these, generally speaking. So now we have half as much death, and infectious diseases have been brought under pretty much control. Now, I say that in the midst of this pandemic. So this pandemic reminds us that just because you have them under control doesn't mean they're gone. But the crude death rate for infectious disease, then just take this line all the way back for human history. Infectious disease used to wipe out massive amounts of our population. Europe, South America, the new Americas in 1492 in the 1500s, estimates are that 90% of the population of the Americas were wiped out by diseases brought over by Europe. But in the last 100 years, when we get vaccines developed by the germ theory, look at the death rate from infectious disease. It's come down significantly. Measles used to kill so many people. Now measles is making a little bit of a comeback, because as you saw for the assignments today in class, the thing about public health is when it works, you start taking it for granted, and all of a sudden you start getting sloppy and lazy with our vaccines, and then these diseases can come back. just a really fascinating graph of, the rate of infectious disease has gone down. And so what's gone up in chronic disease and autoimmune disease. Now, this is the new challenge. And so look at all these vaccines that took off around 1900. Look at all these things. These are all diseases that either killed you or disabled you if you survived. And all of these are now preventable or they've prevented. And this is just a great love letter to science and biomedical research. And we don't want to take this for granted. When we do get a vaccine for COVID, I hope everybody runs to it, because we've all learned painfully what can be done if you don't get infectious disease under control, and then keep getting vaccines to keep these older diseases at bay. And this is just a cool thing. If you guys can click on this. A lot of people have needle phobia. I have a little bit of needle phobia, and this is a new way of transferring injections. It's just like a patch. It's like a little postage stamp that just kind of gets on your, sort of like a nicotine patch, and then it just gives you the vaccine, and then you just throw it off, and then you can apply so many more of these more quickly and safely. Here we go. Here's the reality. This is one of the first big themes for this class. When medicine works, when medicine succeeds, and you have cancer and you're cured, celebration, fundraisers, money flows, endowed fellowships, professorships, Nobel Prizes. When public health works, it becomes invisible. Health works because of vaccines. We take vaccines for granted. Water sanitation, the only time you ever notice water and sanitation is when you don't have it and you have to boil water or you have to go get bottled water. When public health works, you don't see it, it becomes invisible, you take it for granted, it gets underfunded and neglected. Such that you have these problems now across the country where people are like, nope, I don't want to vaccinate my children. You get some of these levels of exemption rates, those places are sitting ducks for these diseases. You see these batches of non-vaccination among sort of like, I would paraphrase as sort of like earthy, crunchy, liberal, conscientious objector liberals. And then you also get people who are like anti-government, not going to tell us what to do. And then what happens is you get an outbreak, like you did at Disneyland about several years ago, and all of a sudden California gets religion on vaccine. It says no more exemptions. We lost a lot of money, people got sick. And it's interesting that California really changed its view and got rid of exemptions when they lost a ton of tourism money. And you're going to see the same thing happen with COVID. People are going to get religion about public health prevention and vaccines because look at all the economic damage COVID-19 is wreaking. And so, it doesn't have to be that way. Prevention, public health, vaccines. California did it. The rates went up. New Jersey tried to emulate California. You can click on this. It's not gone well in New Jersey. People go crazy and get upset. This is the difficulty. People don't scream and get angry and have protests and threaten you when medicine works. But public health sometimes gets a different response. And it's why it's important to show what happens when people don't get vaccinated and diseases come back. And all of a sudden, a father loses 4 or 3 of his 5 children. And he's like, what, to measles? We shouldn't be dying of measles at this point. And don't take it from me, take it from Roald Dahl, who wrote all the best children's books. He lost a child. Olivia, his eldest daughter, died of measles encephalitis, which is rare, but it's in 1% of measles cases, it's basically encephalitis of your brain. And she died. And I mean, he was inconsolable. And he wrote a letter to Britain later on saying, the vaccine wasn't available when my child died. It is now. For God's sake, everybody get the vaccine. No parent ever wants to go through the horribleness of this. So get your vaccines. And these are just, I'll let you all, I'm not going to belabor these graphs. I want to keep these lectures to about a half hour so you can absorb them while you're doing all your work. Reactions in a very small proportion, and then a few seizures, which is that good? No, but relative to what you're going to deal with. This is the trade-off in public health. There's always a little bit of risk whenever you use a vaccine. There's always a risk with medicine. There's always a risk with these products. We can't say there's zero risk. There is an infinitesimal risk. About 1 in a million people will be harmed. We have funds for that. And if you say, I don't want to take the risk, well, this is what you're going to be dealing with. On measles, on the flu. The flu kills. Some of the children who've died at the border of Mexico and Texas, they've died of influenza. Cervical cancer. We don't have to get cervical cancer anymore. We have a vaccine for it. Get the vaccine, these deaths don't happen. And this is just for so long, people have been lashing out at people who are pro-vaccine, and now doctors aren't lashing back, but they're saying you can't stay silent. You gotta come out and say, no, it's not true. Here's the science. Here's the data. Here are the stories, the anecdotes to show the power of vaccines. And some people are saying, well, let's just get to herd immunity the natural way with COVID. We could do it. It could happen, but the reason we're all staying home is we're flattening this curve, because if you eventually you'll get to herd immunity if everybody gets exposed, but if everybody gets exposed real quickly, then the number of cases will just overwhelm the healthcare system. I want to show you what is real quick. As a parent myself, I cannot understand why the mom went with this, but just for the fun, enjoy this.
A mother and her teenage son are at odds over the safety of childhood vaccines. High school senior Ethan Lindenberger says his parents' misguided beliefs about his health and the health of his younger siblings put them at risk. He recently defied his mother and got vaccinated. Dr. Tara Narula shows us what can happen when children raised in anti-vaccine households start to get their own information. Tara, good morning.
Good morning, John. Ethan Lindenberger says he turned to Reddit, an online message board, to help him find the truth about vaccines. After reading scientific papers and journals, he came to the conclusion he had to disobey his mother and get immunized.
Disobey your parents.
I question her judgment, but not her care.
For most of his life, Ethan Lindenberger thought it was normal for most kids not to get immunized. But about 2 years ago, he began to see how the posts about vaccines his own mother was sharing on social media were dangerous.
You have something like measles, which is a preventable disease that we can vaccinate against, that I and many people believe is coming back because of opinions like the ones that have influenced my mom.
In November, Lindenberger asked strangers on Reddit where he could go to get up to date with his shots. "My parents are kind of stupid," he wrote. "God knows how I'm still alive."
I was like, what? I was just blown away.
Jill Wheeler is his mother.
Yes,
There's
Jill.
a degree of feeling like, he doesn't trust what I say as a parent.
The intention of that wasn't to blame my parents for anything or make them look dumb. That came from a place of frustration and trying to deal with this issue and find common ground.
Lindenberger showed his parents scientific studies that showed vaccines were safe and effective, but his mother remained unconvinced.
I think it was just straight up fear of him getting these immunizations and having a bad reaction. I think a lot of people look at this as a straight black and white answer, and I don't feel like it is.
Lindenberger is 18, and in Ohio, he's old enough to get shots without his parents' permission. In December, he got vaccinated for influenza, hepatitis, tetanus, and HPV.
Way to go, Ethan.
His 16-year-old brother, who's now considering also getting his shots, will have to wait. There is no federal law mandating children be immunized. Only 7 states and Washington, D.C. allow minors to get vaccinations without parental consent.
I'm very proud of him
Yes.
for standing for what he believes in, even if it is against what I believe. It's he's a good boy. He's a good kid.
Ethan is getting his next round of vaccinations later this month.
Oh my. I'm telling you, as a parent, can only imagine the conversations before and after this segment. Okay, Ethan. That's public health, prevention, promote, protect. I think the estimate is about 2/3 to 3/4 of the conditions, illnesses that people ultimately develop are preventable. Not all, sometimes just bad things happen. But so much of what we end up spending money on and attention on and medicine on is preventable. And the illustration you'll often hear is medicine and curative treatment is downstream, public health is upstream. So if you keep seeing kids coming down the river that need to be rescued, you can do that. You can rescue them. You can give them medical care, treat them, get them healed. But it might be worth sending one of your team upstream to see who's pushing the kids in or why are they falling in and prevent that. So you might be wondering, after all of this, like, why isn't everybody excited about public health? Why don't we spend a ton of money on it when we spend the vast majority of our healthcare on curative medicine? And I'm going to go through all the different reasons why real quickly we tend to be bigger on medicine. The first one is our emotional makeup. Our emotions lean towards you when you get sick. When you get sick, we'll stop everything we're doing and take you to the hospital and give you care. But to prevent you getting sick, not as emotional. So if you see kids in a nursery or an orphanage that need care, people write checks, they go, no problem. But if you say, hey, we want to be involved in family planning in these communities, and we want to give out contraception, and we want to give sex education so that kids aren't born who end up in orphanages, people are like, well, they're not as comfortable with that. That's prevention. And I always joke that even Jesus did lots of healings, but he didn't do any public health. So maybe even Jesus didn't get it, but I'm not comfortable criticizing the deity. So let's just say he probably did get it, but nobody came to him. Nobody in the Bible came to him for public health and prevention. They all came to him like lepers and blind people and sick people saying, cure us. And he did. He's generous, but didn't do a lot of public health. Second reason why people don't get into public health is we are much more rationalizing than we are rational. We think we're super rational. The science tends to show that we have usually an immediate emotional reaction, and then we give a rationalization for it. And so public health is scientific and informed, but it scares people. It has fear. It might conflict with their philosophy or their politics or their religion. And so oftentimes, even though public health makes sense, we rationalize why we don't do it. Third reason is we have in our brains a very accurate fight or flight thing that helps us deal with really intense situations that are a threat to us physically. But public health often says, hey, obesity is a risk, but it takes 30 years. Smoking is a risk, but it takes 30 years. And if we don't have an immediate reaction to it, we don't sort of respond proportional to the risk. So the fun example is, which one is scarier? And people often say, oh, well, God, the shark is scarier. Which one's actually more dangerous? What kills more people? And when the deer come into our backyard, we stop everything and say, hey, kids, look at the deer. They're so cute. If you live in rural areas, you know that deer are cute and they're wonderful, but they're dangerous because they cross roads a lot. And a big deer coming through your windshield will kill you. How many people die by shark attacks? 1 a year at most. So this is much less likely, but we actually will think about this more. And if we do anything, we'll do more to prevent this than this. And then if you want proof about how people respond, all of these things come out. Whenever Discovery Channel needs to make money with advertising, they run Shark Week. I can't get past it. Once I go to it, I'm watching it. Shark movies, if you saw Sharknado 3, no apologies. Sharknado 1, I can understand. Nobody should be seeing Sharknado 3. And there's no deer nado, right? You can't make a deer nado. You can't make people afraid of deer. So, now though we're learning, and this is, we're all getting a lesson in COVID-19 that even though you can't see it, even though it seems like we're overreacting, go visit Italy, New York, places where this has been out of control, and you realize. The other thing about public health is there are two kinds of public health: passive interventions and active interventions. All these are things that are done and you don't have to change your lifestyle at all. That's all public health. That's awesome. That's the easier stuff to do because it's invisible to your life. Active interventions to make you live healthier and to prevent require that you change your behavior, and those things are harder to do. So that's, this is all pre-COVID, but for the last 50 years, public health has been more like, change individual things like water sanitation and milk pasteurization and clean air. And then they became more lifestyle. But now we're actually getting a resurgence of infectious disease with COVID-19. Now, look at this. Look at the heart disease down, cancer down, stroke down. So we're making progress on these killers as well. And then the cancer death rates dropped by the largest on record. This is great. And cancer death rates continue to go down, and that's a good thing. Everybody wants cancer rates to go down. But sometimes cancer rates going down at the same time that life expectancy is still going down means that we're not actually, we're not making the right decisions with our investments in healthcare, because if you spend a ton of money on cancer and that goes down, but you're still having a lower life expectancy or life expectancy is stalled, that means people are dying of other things, and we're not getting a good enough return on our investment. So, sort of the big message at the end of this is we have huge disparities, and they were big before COVID-19. They're bigger now. The single most important fact about you as a person that I need to know to predict your life expectancy is not your name, it's not your gender, it's not your education, it's none of that. It's your 5-digit zip code. And in the United States, one zip code can live on average 20 years longer than people in another zip code. Your zip code is the most determinative, most predictive fact about you. And where we live in Richmond here, 5 miles apart separates a 20-year life expectancy. U of R's over here, this is where we live. Life expectancy is in the low 80s. Down by Gilpin Court next to BCU's hospital, 63. Your zip code is the most predictive thing. And we're seeing that hugely with COVID-19. You look at the maps of New York City about who's been hit the most, who's died the most. It's the poorest parts of New York. All right, and the wealthy New Yorkers are getting the heck out and flying someplace. Who's getting hit the most by COVID-19? Is it cross-sectionally across the population of the United States? No. It's disproportionately people of color who have to go work, who live in intergenerational housing. They're the ones who are more likely to get hit by COVID-19. If you're wealthier and you have second homes and you can quarantine, and if you can work at home, then you're safer. And so you can't refute these statistics. Zip code, race, socioeconomic status, very predictive of who's getting hit the most by COVID-19. And so just to bring back some middle school memories and channel some of those high school things that got you into the university, we're going to end with Crash Course.
Good morning, Hank. It's Tuesday. So what if I told you that for Americans, a single data point can affect your life expectancy more than whether you smoke, whether you get an annual physical, or whether you exercise regularly? That data point is your zip code, the 5-digit number the U.S. Postal Service uses to deliver your mail. In the U.S., your zip code can affect your life expectancy by 20 years. And according to some recent research, the gap between the healthiest communities and the sickest ones is getting bigger. So I live in the city of Indianapolis, and in my zip code, life expectancy is around 80, which is slightly higher than the US average. But if you live 3 miles north of my house, average life expectancy rises to 83.7. And if you live 3 miles south of my house, it falls to 69.4. Now, maybe that doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but just to put it in some context, on average, exercising. Then you're going to spend another 1.5 years sleeping. You basically get 2 extra years, except of course that's not how life expectancy works. If you, a particular individual, exercise, it doesn't mean that your particular life will be increased by 4.5 extra years or even 4.5 extra hours. It just means that on average that's what happens. Similarly, living in a particular zip code doesn't mean a particular fate for individuals, but on average, geography has a huge impact on American health and longevity. So what's causing that profound life expectancy gap? Well, as usual, it's complicated. Like the Eastern Kentucky communities where life expectancy is under 70 have higher rates of tobacco usage than the Central Colorado communities where life expectancy is over 85. But Eastern Kentucky is also poorer and has fewer doctors. Communities with low life expectancy tend to have less access to healthy food and more uninsured people. People in those communities are also more likely to have certain chronic health problems like diabetes and hypertension, whereas the people in the healthiest communities tend to be, rich and have excellent access to healthcare. And the zip codes with the highest life expectancy also tend to be in places where there's lots of physical activity, like ski resorts in Colorado or wealthy beach towns in California. Now, I know to many of us this is not surprising, like we take it for granted that rich people will have dramatically longer and healthier lives than poor people, but increasing inequality of life expectancy within countries is not actually the norm. In fact, while life expectancy variability has been rising within the US steadily since 1980, in most other rich countries it's been declining. Canada, for instance, has seen a significant decline, which is one of the main reasons why Canada's overall life expectancy is higher than ours, even though the richest 20% of Americans live longer on average than the richest 20% of Canadians. Side note, lots of people take issue with life expectancy as a health metric, especially when comparing one country to another, and with some good reasons. But the data we're discussing here is mostly exempt from those critiques. Much more info and sources in the doobly-doo below. Right, so this growing discrepancy in life expectancy is not normal, and it is not natural. We don't have to accept that lifespan will vary dramatically within a country based on where you live. But right now in the United States, that problem is getting worse, not better. That seems to me deeply wrong. I mean, our Declaration of Independence famously names 3 inalienable rights that Americans should enjoy. And before liberty and the pursuit of happiness, there is life. Hank, I'll see you on Friday. Actually, no, I will see you tomorrow for a surprise bonus Vlogbrothers video, and then I'll see you on Friday.
And I'll see you tomorrow too. Great. Take care, guys.
You have stopped screen share.